Walt Disney World is known to many as the most magical place on Earth.
Do you have a Walt Disney World moment?
Yes!
And it's just pure magic.
From the moment you pass into those iconic gateways, your dreams almost immediately come true. Whether that's getting a picture with Mickey Mouse,
It was the most incredible day of my life just because I met Mickey.
eating 1,000 calories of Mickey-shaped waffles, or getting trampled by the Star Wars stampede. Love it or hate it, you can't deny that it feels like you're being teleported into another universe, one that blurs fact and fiction, imagination and reality. But getting to Disney, especially if you're flying in from out of state, can be a far less magical experience.
Meltdown on the plane.
What's your reaction to all this?
It's not really what I can say on camera. Plus, the flight attendant he was yelling at me.
The only complimentary item on the plane? Ice.
Conventional wisdom would suggest that Disney fanatics just want a cheap way to get to Orlando so they can maximize the amount of dollars they can spend on park admission, dining, and lodging. And for the past couple decades, this theory has largely held true, with low-cost airlines basically taking over Orlando International Airport. But it's not just Spirit and Frontier, it's also Southwest, JetBlue, Avelo, Breeze, and Sun Country. Demand is high, but supply is also high. And the sheer number of participants in this market has driven down airfare prices to record lows. Orlando is the 4th cheapest major airport in the country, with round-trip ticket prices averaging just over $270, about 40% cheaper than New York's JFK Airport, and 30% cheaper than Chicago O'Hare and LAX. Lower airfares generally means thinner margins for airlines, so unless you've got an aggressively low cost base, a la Spirit or Frontier, and/or more profitable flying to offset the Orlando routes, like United and Delta, it's going to be really tough to make money on flying to and from Orlando. So you may think I'm absolutely nuts when I say Disney should start an airline.
Is this some kind of joke?
Are you kidding me?
Well, perhaps not start an airline per se, but get into the airline business. Now, there are many obvious reasons why this would never happen. The first of which is that Disney is a public company and investors would probably view this as a massive risk, especially amidst the backdrop of slowing theme park demand.
Shares of Disney are down 3% today after reporting weaker results for theme parks and citing signs of strain on the lower consumer demand and inflation. The company says it's likely to continue.
And the second, third, and fourth reasons being that airlines are generally hated by passengers, at least relative to other industries.
Have you noticed that flying just keeps getting worse?
I've always had a bad experience with American Airlines.
Don't tell us right as we're about to board the flight's been canceled. And it's not like Delta care. Delta don't care.
Airlines breed so much frustration and anger, sometimes warranted and sometimes not, which could have the potential to wreck Disney's pristine reputation. But we're not here to make the easy argument. So hear me out, because I think Disney is sort of a unique case. One where guests are so bought into the theming that they're willing to pay a lot more than just Aunt Susan flying from Cleveland to Myrtle Beach to escape the cold.
The median annual income in the United States is $74,580, meaning a family of 4 bringing in an average salary would need to pay almost an entire month's income for a multi-day trip to Disney World.
We'll dig more into consumer behavior in a second, but first let's take a look at where this proposed Disney airline may fit into the existing business, which is a lot more than just the parks. Disney is a global, diversified entertainment powerhouse that traces its roots back to animated movies, with the first full-length film being Snow White all the way back in 1937. Today, Disney has 3 business segments: entertainment, sports, and experiences. Entertainment is the biggest segment by revenue, but experiences, aka the parks, hotels, and cruises, is the biggest segment by operating income, meaning it's a lot more profitable than the other segments. So of course, investors love the experiences business for its cash flow, but it's a slower grower, it's asset heavy, and it's cyclical. Streaming is viewed as the future growth engine of Disney, specifically Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus.
We aim, as I said, for this business to be a growth business for the company with margins that our shareholders will feel good about.
It's a way more recurring, predictable, and sticky revenue stream that Disney is uniquely positioned to take advantage of, given its massive content library. And although streaming profits are narrow today, many investors believe Disney could eventually reach Netflix-like margins, which would be huge. But the experiences business isn't going anywhere, and Disney is doubling down, as they should in my opinion, to bring more Disney stories to life and attract more people to its magical themed land.
It's the same as House, you may all recognize.
A major new Lion King attraction.
A whole new location on Pandora.
Now, I know Disney isn't in the transportation business, but they are in the hospitality business and have figured out how to charge massive premiums for very basic accommodations just because they're Disney themed, they're on site, and they can be booked directly through Disney. That brings me to the first and probably most obvious argument for Disney Airlines. It would reduce friction in the vacation booking process and keep more guest dollars in the Disney ecosystem. Right now, you can get your park tickets, your hotels, and even a dining plan through Disney's website, but you need to get your plane tickets elsewhere, at least if you're booking in the US. This can create extra frustration, especially for people that don't fly a lot. They log on to Expedia or Kayak or wherever Aunt Susan told them to look for flights. They see a cheap fare, but don't realize it's a 1 or 2 stop itinerary in basic economy where they'll end up paying more both in direct costs and indirect costs when one of their flights gets delayed or canceled. With Disney, it would be simple. If Disney flies to near where you live, say New York City for example, you could be presented with an option that includes flights, hotels, park tickets, and dining. Disney wouldn't even have to break out the price of the airfare separately. One package, one price, just like a cruise, which they already are familiar with from a margin management standpoint. Okay, reason number 2 for Disney Airlines is that when flying works, it is magical. Soaring above the clouds and exploring new places, defying gravity, and even falling in love. Just like Aladdin and Jasmine on the magic carpet. It would be an excellent marketing opportunity, both in the airport and on the plane. The planes would, of course, be themed, but they'd also feature Disney Plus on seatback screens, Disney snacks like Mickey pretzels, and flight attendants dressed like Disney characters. Back in 2019, rumors were swirling that Disney would do exactly that, but Disney was quick to deny such plans existed. My bet is that Disney modeled it out internally, but ultimately decided against it, and someone couldn't keep their mouth shut. And I'd be surprised if this whole airline thing wasn't an ongoing conversation amongst the business strategy folks at Disney. Even though the company has never flown its own planes, it has sort of dipped its toes in the airline industry, partnering with various airlines over the years to drive more traffic into the parks. In fact, Disney has had several official airline partners, starting with Eastern in 1971.
You can take your family to a place where dreams are born. Walt Disney World on Eastern, the airline with more flights from more cities to Walt Disney World than any other airline.
And later, Delta, when Eastern went under in 1991. And these were more like corporate sponsorships, as the airlines paid to sponsor rides in the parks. Eastern shelled out somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million to get its name and branding on a ride in Tomorrowland called If You Had Wings. The indoor ride basically took guests through a series of Eastern's destinations around the globe, such as Mexico, Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and New Orleans. And if all went according to plan, you'd be inspired to book a trip with one of Eastern's agents as soon as you exited the ride.
Anytime there's a choice, I always say Eastern. Yes, sir. Tickets, baggage, they do it all for you.
Delta had a similar deal with its ride called Delta Dreamflight, which actually replaced If You Had Wings. But once the Delta sponsorship ended in the mid-90s, the whole way Disney interacted with airlines sort of shifted. Instead of having airline branding in the parks, Disney decided it wanted its branding on airplanes. In the late 90s, Japan Airlines launched a series of themed 747s, coinciding with their agreement with Disney to become the official airline of Tokyo's Disney parks. Then, in the US, we saw our first Disney-themed plane in 2002, when Alaska Airlines converted one of their 737-400s into the Spirit of Disneyland. Over the ensuing decades, Alaska, WestJet, and United have all offered some sort of magical color scheme on their planes. And over in Asia, China Eastern took things to a whole new level with their multiple themed A330s, and more recently, a Zootopia-themed A320. So the idea of a flying Mickey Mobile is certainly not new, and Disney could take inspiration from any of these co-branding attempts if it seeks to run its own operation. So what would a Disney airline look like? Where would it fly? What planes would it use? Would it start from scratch or buy an existing carrier, like a Breeze or a Velo? Well, to start, I think it would be based in Orlando, obviously, and they could start by launching routes to 5 or 10 domestic destinations, such as New York, DC, Chicago, and Philly. It would probably compete mostly with the budget carriers, as those travelers are the least likely to be loyal to United or Delta, and also the most likely to opt for a package as opposed to booking flights separately. However, that doesn't mean they can't have premium seats. Just like it sells concierge class on its cruise ships, it should be able to sell a first class on its planes, which would include the typical benefits like free meals and priority boarding, but also might afford extra perks in the parks, even if you're not staying at a Disney resort hotel. Further, you might be offered access to a Disney lounge at MCO, which would help ease the Disney withdrawal symptoms at the tail end of your vacation, especially if you have kids. In terms of planes, they'd almost certainly have to start with some used narrow bodies, given supply constraints on new aircraft. Acquiring an existing carrier would enable Disney to save time on buying planes, hiring pilots, and obtaining FAA regulatory approvals, but the amount of modifications to the planes and route structure would still be significant, as the whole point of this airline, in my view, would be to offer a unique and distinct experience tailored to the Disney fanatic. From an operational standpoint, it would be great if this airline could scoop up some gates in Orlando's new Terminal C, which would be a differentiator in and of itself, as JetBlue is the only domestic carrier currently operating out of there. Disney's gate areas could be modified to include extra amenities such as games, movies, and snacks, in addition to the occasional character meet and greet, which would make delays and/or cancellations a lot more bearable than it would be with the Spirit or Frontier. Now look, at the end of the day, the airline business is tough. There's a reason why Disney hasn't launched an airline yet, and I get it. They'd face many of the same challenges United, Delta, and them: labor shortages, rising fuel prices, tight aircraft supply, to name a few, and not benefit from the same economies of scale. But a Disney airline would have several unique advantages, the first being its brand and its heritage as an experiences company. Disney knows how to entertain its guests, and perhaps more importantly, to distract them from reality. And this expertise could be applied to make flying bearable even for the most tired, cranky, and/or apprehensive of travelers. The second advantage would be that the market is very clearly defined and unambiguous. Disney has a ton of rich data on where its guests are coming from and going to, and they could leverage that data to operate a very targeted route network and match capacity to demand. Now, it would be a bit of trial and error when it comes to figuring out what exactly the ideal customer looks like for Disney Air. I'm assuming the sweet spot would be park guests and cruise passengers, but then could you get any non-Disney traffic? Certainly not business travelers, but perhaps people traveling to Orlando to see family or friends and may not have the time or money to visit the parks. It's a really interesting puzzle to solve and think about. I could probably go on for another 20 minutes, but I just wanted to pose the question and get the conversation going. Do you think a Disney airline could ever be viable? Would you fly it if it existed? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks again for joining me today, and I wish you the safest and happiest of travels wherever your journeys may take you. So long from Flaps HQ here in Orlando.